APIs for Asterisk media applications with Kong. Long title for basically Asterisk and Kong. I work for Nexicom. It's a New York-based and Dallas-based telephony company, we could call it. I mean, we've been up for quite some time now, so we've turned into a call center and telephony and integration cloud provider. I was so eager to clean this presentation that I removed my name from it. My name is Gaston, and I'll be talking to you about Kong and Asterisk. So the first question is, why Kong? Are we playing with this nice hammer and looking for a nail? No, definitely not. A couple of years ago, actually, at least for the last 4 years, we've been having certain requirements, and we've been providing more and more services, not only the telephony services, but a lot of integrations. And having been one of the lead integrators and customizations in Asterisk for at least a decade, like you all, we've got a little tired of reinventing the wheel with every single client. So instead of that, we've been enabling our clients with ways to access the functionality. And if there was a functionality that needed to be created, great, we created that functionality and it gets added into the pool. And not only that client can use it, but every other client, and most clients are very happy with that because they don't have to pay for a custom project for the little thing that they need. If it makes sense for everybody, then so much better. So we've been working with APIs quite a long time, and of course, we've jumped the wagon like everybody else with nginx. We've written our modules. Well, I'm pretty sure many of you have gone through the same process. It's lovely, it's great, it works, but we're just a small, tiny company. Why not look around and see if there's another project taking care of that and use it and improve it and help improve it? So our main requirements for an API gateway, and for those who don't know what an API gateway is basically and when I say API gateway, I mean HTTP gateway, right? So it's this gateway where your clients connect to in order to access your services via usually a REST API. So our requirements were very specific. It needed to be a single function, right? We did not need everything under the sun. It needed to be a small application, if possible. It needed to obviously be HTTP REST all the things, meaning it wasn't going to be just this API gateway that then you had to work on the side. No, we want our REST API gateway to be also REST API fully. So we only speak one language, and that is an HTTP request. It needs to be function driven. It needs to be agnostic in terms of methodology. And I know this sounds kind of strange, but if you do go through the process that we went through, you'll find that certain big API gateway projects do impose certain methodology. And so in order for you to implement it, then before you even start working with it, there's a series of things that you need to do. And we certainly didn't have the time for that. Components need to be standard. In case something breaks, we want to make sure that we can jump right into it. And one of them being nginx obviously made us feel very comfortable with the project. And the overall approach, meaning a single problem solution. These solve the API gateway problem, period. Okay? If I needed a management system, if I needed something else, then maybe I'll look for something else, but it was not what we were looking for. We were looking for a tool. Obviously, nginx is a tool in itself, but it needed work, which we did at one point, but we got tired of it. The current version of Kong, by the way, if you look into Kong, it's been around for a couple of years now, but it has definitely improved, and it improves really, really fast. That means two things. One, you may have built something that is no longer relevant. If you take a look at my talk from last year, you'll listen that at some point, aside from the fact that I forgot my glasses, I could barely see the screen, that aside from Kong, we had in our organization what we call an API router, because we were taking care of splitting these APIs into different routes. And since Kong was not able to do that, then we had to do it ourselves. So we had our API router. We still have it for other functions and means, but at least when it comes to the routes, from one Astricon to the other, that's gone. That was added into Kong, and it really changes things. The current version is 14.14, although it was announced a couple of weeks ago that version 1 is finally out, which means that it will be constantly backward compatible, which these versions are kind of not. And well, the company behind it is Kong. It was original Mashape, and you can go to GitHub and their site, and they have all the documentation, all the code, of course. For those of us who are used to knowing what tools we use, I guess maybe it's because of my father. When I was a kid, he used to tell me how to, what was the right way to grab a specific tool. So, we tend to know what it is that we're working with. Kong, when I said it's standard, it is standard. And it's the API gateway layer, which is basically a proxy, the control API, and a variety of plugins that basically add on all the functionality. Now, if you need everything else, like enterprise plugins or a manager or a development portal, if you don't have any of that, or you have pieces going around that you haven't put together and you're looking for a solution, well, they offer an enterprise solution. But the core of the solution is totally, completely open source, okay? So what are the components? First of all, Kong is written in Lua. So what it does is nginx provides a Lua module, right? An nginx Lua module. With that, nginx can be programmed, and you can program basically modules in Lua. So instead of Kong, instead of writing using the nginx Lua module, what they did is they bundled OpenResty, which already has nginx Lua module. So basically, Kong is a lightning fast code, okay? It's really light and fast. It works side by side with nginx. So that's the kind of scalability that we're talking about. And also, it's very simple to write modules. If you go to the site, they have the entire SDK, and you can see example modules, and it's very easy going in those regards. For those of us coming from writing a module for Asterisk. So what's the storage? Now here's where everything changes, right? Here's where you get really different flavors of the solution. Kong is meant to scale. That's the key thing. Now, to be honest, for our industry, the throughput that a single Kong server can handle is way more than what we do. We are CPU intensive, right? We know what calls are. The amount of traffic that we have in throughput, there's no relation between that and the amount of connections. So this is more web-driven. So when we move these into the telco world, it's more than enough. Right now we have 4, and I mean, to be honest, 1 will be more than enough. Okay, this runs in the several tens of thousands of concurrent connections. If you translate that into calls, you go, wait, no way, I'm not going to go that big, right? But having redundancy is always a good thing. Now, there are several layers for many of us who are used to Postgres. Now, they have PostgreSQL as well as their data storage. Originally, Cassandra is the proper data storage solution. Now, one thing about this is that, and this is a side note, if you start playing with this, you won't read this anywhere, is that if you set this to just startup on any server, Kong would most likely not come up because it totally depends on retrieving the entire configuration from the database, okay? So Cassandra takes some time to come up, so you'll have to fiddle with those, okay? If you go with Postgres, you won't have that problem. Although if you go to Cassandra, you'll scale more. Now, one thing that's important to understand is that Kong loads up all the configuration into memory, right? And even though through the admin API, it can store modifications to that configuration and send that notification to other Kong nodes, actually, there are certain things that you will need redis for, like for counters, for instance. Otherwise, each Kong will keep its own counters, right? And this is very important because let's say you're providing your client with a cap of, I don't know, 10,000 API calls per hour or something like that, right? And you have some load balancing. Let's say you're using DNS for it, and this client is hitting one server and then is hitting the other. So those counts need to be taken by both, and both know how many hits each server took. So for that, you go with Redis. Okay, so you need to add Redis, basically. So like I said before, the functionality gets implemented in Kong via what they call plugins, which these are basically Lua modules for nginx. And it handles pretty much everything, but one hint that I would give you is that the only reasonable way to go about using these modules, these plugins, is by using authentication. So you don't go through that problem like I did the very first time I tried it. Because authentication, what it creates what it calls a consumer. A consumer is just an ID. It's you, right? It's your username, so to speak. So once Kong has that username, it can keep track of things. It can authenticate. It can check whether certain plugin is enabled for you or not. So it's very, very consumer-centric. There's a trick to create an anonymous consumer, but it's really a trick. It's an anonymous consumer that anybody can use that has certain capabilities. And it's been changing towards serviceless and mesh. One of the examples that I will show you handles how to use a mesh internally. We use meshes internally because we have ARI-based Asterisk applications. That's a very long name for basically an Asterisk application. But these are in-house applications. So since our services are distributed, some component may need to use a specific service. And that becomes kind of complicated to manage once you have many services flying around, right? So we use Kong as a way to manage the traffic. And this really helps us metrics. Let's translate into business. This helps you bill for things. Because when you have internal services, one of the most critical issues we have is to identify who uses what and how much. And one of the good things about Kong is that it keeps all of these logs. And the logging capabilities it has, well, if you look at it, it has more logging capabilities than authentication capabilities. Well, it has the ones that we like, which are UDP and TCP logging capabilities. And so you can send them wherever you log. Obviously, you have syslog and the works. I wouldn't use HTTP for obvious reasons. The admin side of Kong is the most important one because it's the one that we use, really. The other ones are being used by our clients. And our clients, all they have is they have our API documentation, how to authenticate, what requests they can make, what the answers are, formats, and so on and so on. There's nothing new there that I could talk to you about. But the admin API is slightly different. First, one of the main changes is that we didn't used to have services and routes. We had APIs. And that was the problem that I discussed before that changed within the year. Now we have this split. So we can have services, which are a very high-level abstraction. And within that service, we can have as many routes as we want. And each route can be handled individually, not only in terms of where it goes, but also in terms of its capabilities. Maybe I have a service that I want to, I have 4 routes and only one of them I really need login for. In the previous schema, what we had is that if I had login for the entire API. If I had a specific plugin enabled, I had it for the entire API. And you need to keep remembering that this comes from the web world. So when it comes to high traffic, these little differences make a lot of difference, especially when it comes to login. The rest are pretty much the same. The consumer is basically the one using the API. The plugin is the functionality that you enable or disable. You can have an API that has no functionality whatsoever. So it's really fine-grained. Obviously, this poses a challenge in terms of management. You have to manage this. You have to integrate it into your processes somehow. For instance, to give you an example, whenever we set up a client and we enable a specific API, on the contract, the contract system checks the billing system goes into ops takes care of everything, validates everything, and then it goes to the contract, says, that's okay. Well, that's a lot of work. But I guess that's what we're all for. I need to go pick both my kids, sorry. Certificates is nice, upstreams and targets. Another thing is certificates. So you shouldn't worry about this. It's 100% TLS. Obviously, most of you are going to say, yeah, well, anybody can set up TLS in an nginx server. That's really nothing big there. Yeah, well, but you can actually handle the services, the certificates of your upstreams. Not only, obviously, it's not Kong holding every certificate. You could do that too. But also handles the TLS of the upstreams. The upstreams are the servers at the back. Okay. So what's the basic request workflow? So basically, we have a client which is called consumer, sends in a request. There is an API which is called service now, and that API has routes and plugins enabled. And based on that, it will send it somewhere if all of the rules of the API of the plugin were passed. Otherwise, it will reject however it should. And then there's a target, which is the upstream. And for that, I can also set up specific rules. This has to do, when you're talking about the targets and the upstreams, this has a lot to do with load balancing internal services. And that is very useful, especially when it comes to telecom, right? You have a voicemail service, for instance, right? And at a given point, you realize that you're reaching your limit, and so you spin off another box, however you do that, and you just dynamically, via the admin API of Kong, you add that new upstream to a specific target, and there you go. Depending on the load balancing strategy that you've chosen, it will go one way or the other. So basically, you're going to deal with that on the internal side. So I made it really fast. Sorry about that, because I wanted to show you a couple of things running, which is always fun for you. So yeah, before I go through that, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of a lot of screams going around, and it's not going to make much sense. So the first one we're going to try is a typical access, right? Something you would never want to do. Provide a client with access to the AGEM or AMI over HTTP API in Asterisk. Okay, this means Asterisk has a mini web server. It can enable an API access to Asterisk Manager interface, which is, as it says, the management interface of Asterisk. And it does so via HTTP. For a variety of reasons, we know that's not a good thing to do. But maybe you want to do it internally. And this is where I was coming back to meshes, right? For some reason, there are APIs you want to provide your clients with. Maybe there are APIs you want to provide yourself. So if you're going through Kong, you're going to have to do this. The second one is completely different. Is also something that I might not want a client to do, which is provide them access to the ARI interface. Now, this is the Asterisk Restful Interface. ARI, for those who don't know it, is a RESTful interface to Asterisk internals. It's not AMI on steroids, okay? It's totally different. Is accessing the internals of Asterisk. So you handle channels, okay? You don't handle calls. You don't dial. These kind of things don't happen in ARI. But we do, so because we have, like I said, ARI-based applications internally, so we need to be able to do that internally. These also adds a layer of security, right? Because Kong has all the plugins that I explained before regarding authentication. In this case, we have an outsider, right? Accessing Kong for an ARI route. That ARI route goes to an ARI service. For those who don't know how ARI works, the initial request is going to be over HTTP/HTTPS. Whenever I say HTTP, and a friend correct me today, so I'm going to clarify it. Whenever I say HTTP, I mean HTTPS, right? For production, there's no other way. So your connection would be HTTP first, but then there's going to be an upgrade, and it's going to switch into WebSockets. So for Kong, all of this is okay. This is obvious, knowing that it's based on nginx, okay? And so then all of the traffic will go through Kong. All of the WebSockets traffic is going to go through Kong. And the third one is more of a meshy approach. There's basically a client accessing an internal application, and this internal application also goes through Kong, and Kong goes again into another application. So the third one is a typical mesh layout, right, that you would have in your infrastructure. Okay, I'm not sure if that helped. But that's what we are going to go through, hopefully all together. Okay, so I did check this. I'm going to check it again because it's not going to be the first time that it's not up. And I have here this Asterisk 13 with 2 endpoints there. There is 2 AORs over there, 6003 and 6005. That's kind of a foobar in my company. We always use the same 2 extensions for whatever reason. Okay, and here I have an outside server. So what I'm going to do from the outside now is I'm going to execute. Let me see if I'm in the right place. Yes. I'm going to execute a Golang-based ARI application. So this application is going to, let me see if we jump fast. What this is going to do is going to go through Kong, it's going to go into Asterisk, it's going to register a Stasis application, right, called next meeting, because this is basically a dynamic conference room of sorts. I'm just going to initiate it. If I call right now into that number, I'm going to get dead. Nothing. Number. Okay, that was up. Oh no, that was sorry, not a problem. Hold on. No, that was not up. That was the prompt. But as soon as please enter the conference PIN number. As soon as I want, dead. That's dead. Why? Because there was no application to go to. Okay, that's one of the ARI things. You know, it's not an application that you can call upon unless it's up. Okay, so I'm gonna now trigger it. There you go. Oof. And there we go. And that's Asterisk, and there's where the status application got registered and activated. Okay. And if I go to Kong, and I said just the typical ngrep on the port, we will be able to see all the activity once I go in.
Number.
There you go. So all of those messages, what you're watching there is Kong. So all of those messages are the messages between the ARI application in Asterisk and the application in the outside. So you need to understand that for in ARI, you don't run the applications inside. Okay, it's code that you execute. Basically, this is a request. You know, start this channel, move this here, set music on hold. It's a set of orders, right? Of course, if you want to set of orders on the other side, you can't be blindfolded. That's why you need WebSockets, because you need to know what's going on the other end. Okay, and those are the events. So right now we have these communication, and Kong is okie dokie with it. Now, why is that? Because there needs to be a route. There needs to be actually, what I did here is ARI. So I'm going to show you ARI, and then I'm going to show you the next one. So this is what we did, basically. Here is, there you go. So here what we did is we created a service called Asterisk ARI, right? And we said what the URL would be. In this case, I did not use an app stream or a target, for instance. Like I said before, you don't need to use the entire set. In this case, I just created an ARI that, a service that has that URL as a target, which is the, as you can see here, the application server, right? And here's the name, and here's the path. And as you can see, this is generic, right? So now what we have, what we didn't used to have before, is that aside from the service, I have a route. So if I post this into the Kong admin interface, what I set up here is this route, which is /ARI, right? I am allowing requests for this domain, and I can set up an internal IP if I want to, right? And this is where the external application is talking to. And that's all it took, really. Obviously, Asterisk is prepared to receive that, and so on and so forth. Now, I can, when I apply a plugin like authentication, for instance, and I say, well, your consumer, blah, blah, with this hash as a key, for instance, right? Then I will request that. And the HTTP request obviously would include that. But this gets add on, basically. And so if you start working with this, I strongly suggest that you work your way from inside out. Try to work out the functionality that you want to work, and then start adding layers, and it's really like building blocks. That's the ARI one. Let me go here. Okay, so this one is the Asterisk manager interface that I was talking about. So I call this one Asterisk AJAM. It's going to the same one on the same port. Why? Because ARI and AJAM use the same mini browser, right? So it makes sense. Mini web server, sorry. And this one is generic as well. I have the route. Here I added something which I did not in the previous one, right? Because they were all posts. But you can also fine-grain methods. In the previous one, I did not define which methods were allowed, and so all methods were allowed. But in this case, I can define these methods to be allowed, or few, right? So you also have that kind of granularity when it comes to requests. Now I included the path, which is Roman, which is the default asterisk path for AGEM, right? And we can check that the route exists, and it says response error, missing action is request, which is the answer we want, basically, because that is asterisk saying what you've asked. I don't know what you're asking me. Okay, if the route was wrong, I would get a totally different message back. So I'm gonna authenticate here with the basic default also settings for AGEM. Right, I get authenticated. I can check my status. And all of this is going right now through Kong. And I'm going to execute, I'm going to execute a command. And we can see here the two endpoints and the AORs that I showed you before. I can actually check a specific one, which is 6003. And we're good. So right now what I did is allow access to the AMI via HTTP. Okay, so now to a more practical case, like a typical your dial API, right? You provide an API to your clients. Of course, you have a dial. Otherwise, what are we doing here? So there's variations, of course. You will have dial to internal feature codes, dial to between two numbers, dial between a service and a number, and well, you'll juggle with those along, I guess. This dialer, this particular set, hold on, let me go here so we can see what we're doing. We go through the same process. A service, right? A route. In this case, this route goes to the path dial, which makes for a good. One thing that I did not mention is that when you assign a route, obviously you assigned it to a service, and that is via that section there, which is service ID, which maybe somebody already figured that one out. This is the ID of this service, okay? So like I said before, everything makes sense and it fits, but obviously having to deal with in a larger scale requires management from your part. Kong's not going to do that. So what we're going to do right now is, I'm going to show the slide again because actually it's kind of complicated. Is we're going to send the request, right? We're going to, before what we did is we initiated applications, right? Well, here we send the request. Here we initiated an application. Now we're going to send a request, right? It shouldn't say AMI here, sorry. And we're going to send the request. Then this application is going to go through Kong again, through an API in Kong, and that is going to go into a service that is actually going to make the call. Which all boils down to that request up there, which is CAD, Kong, blah, 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 the port, dial, which is the route that we created. The service does not show up because the service is internal, right? It defines rules, targets, upstreams, modules, and so on and so forth. So you won't see that up here. And the number to dial, which is in this case, 6003. And okay, that failed. That's usually not a good thing. And we're going to have to, hey, that's good, have time. That came out okay. Did I close the... Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, let me see this. Okay, let's do this, which is sweet and nice, and everybody loves it. Works every time. Okay. So, these and these are exactly the same. The query is fine. Okay, that was it. Okay, so lovely. No problem. Okay. So basically, this is like the first example. I enable. Remember, I enabled an application and then I called in. In this case, what happened is that I had an application, enable the application, and call me and send me into the application. That's why the whole recursive thing. So, hey, this is lovely. We have lots of time for questions. I usually run out of time. So it was good. Taking my name away seems to do the trick. Anybody using API Gate? Anybody providing APIs to their clients? If you tell me no, then it means more business for me. Nobody? Really? Yeah. So this is great because it's not about one thing that the clients love, for instance. I'll give it to you for free. It's reports. I hate it when somebody asks me for a report. Like, what report? Please, oh God, no. And that's another thing. You provide an API for them. So it's way easier, right? Because you say, well, I have my PBX, and it goes to the CDRs, and oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. The first call you get is somebody asking you, how can we automate this process where you send me, or send him, or send them the CDRs, because they have to go through accounting, they have to do this, they have to do that, they have to integrate into CRMs, you name it, right? Oh no, but you have the CRM interface. Oh, thank you, right? So this is system driven. What we're looking for is, yes, there's a window for you to see things, but we would love it if another computer saw it for you, right? Because it makes everybody's lives easier. It speeds up the process. We have clients that are happier right now because most of them have somebody in development, somebody integrating something, right? And they are internally developing the service. And many clients, some of them have NDAs. Many of them think that, they're discovering, the wheel. So for whatever reason, they don't tend to open up to you. And so you provide them with all of the information they need when they need it. And if there's a service that makes sense, it's easy to add it, right? And you add the service, you enable the API, you add it to your processes, everybody's happy. At least that's our story. Maybe yours is different. I hope it's not. You will see that there are other API gateways. There's another one. There's another one that I saw a couple of years ago, and I gave it a chance, but it belongs to the EPA. And that was bad news a couple of years ago. So that project is no longer heavily developed. There's another one I like a lot, which is Tyke. You may also know Traffic, but that's different. Even though it works like a gateway, it's definitely different. Probably if you're using a lot of Kubernetes, maybe you want to go through, you want to try Traffic. But Tyke is really nice also. It's written in Go. It has a different licensing system that doesn't really fit in with us. That's the only problem we had with it. It's not a problem actually. It's incompatibility, right? Sometimes things are not compatible. That's all. So, questions? Oop. Nothing? Okay. That usually means I didn't do my job. Okay, guys. Something else that I might want to show you. One thing that may be useful to you is how you upgrade Kong. Because right now we've been through several of those iterations. So the answer to the big problem is really short, really. If you upload your data, meaning your logs and everything, and you have some sort of a management system, otherwise it's suicidal, to be honest, to have this and to have everything, all of the configuration there and the repository of how things work are there, then obviously you're in trouble, right? But if that is not the case, which in most cases that is what happens, then it's really easy, because to reconfigure an entire Kong it's just a series of HTTP requests. It's really, really easy. So instead of going through upgrading processes, you just spin off the new version, right? And you just load it up with all the configurations. There's no biggie about that. You may have a split cluster for a while, because both won't be able to depend on the same Cassandra schema, right? Which Cassandra calls, and Kong calls for whatever reason migrations. I cannot get used to that yet, which is basically the definition of the database, okay? So that's the only thing. You have a split cluster, and you just migrate, then you point everything to the second one, everything's okie dokie, boom, you let the other one go. Could you do it differently? Yes. Kong states that basically you can upgrade live, on a hot, so you don't have to do any of this. I haven't done that. So I don't know, maybe I love my clients too much. But supposedly you can do that. You can do that. You can basically upgrade your Kong and run basically an upgrade on your database, which is usually minor modifications, right? And that's pretty much it. And other than that, I mean, no more pearls, other than if you're trying it with Cassandra, make absolutely sure that Cassandra comes up. One trick might save you a couple of days is the first time you set it up, it's going to come up with your defaults, okay? And that includes the Cassandra configuration. And that is really bad, because once part of the Kong and Cassandra configuration are inside Cassandra. So since it's default, you go into the configuration files, you modify everything, everything looks good, everything is down, you turn up Cassandra, fails. And it basically fails forever, because internally it has the previous data. So either you do it via CSQL or CQL, I can never remember Cassandra's acronym for the CLI. Either that, or you just let the entire database, which is empty for the most part, you just delete it, you turn it up, and Kong, since it doesn't find it itself, regenerates it, and you're ready to go. Even though it doesn't sound like it, I just saved you probably a day. Okay, you got something out of it. Guys, we're on time. Thank you.